Welcome to the Cannonball Podcast, Explosive Talk on the Saints. I am Brad Farmer of Apex Ministries, and here on the Cannonball Podcast, we talk about the mysteries and personalities of the saints of the Catholic Church. They have pretty fascinating, interesting stories, but not only do we want to think about that, we want to consider how we can collaborate, how we can play a role together to build the kingdom of Jesus Christ. So I don't know what other podcasts might be offering, but one of the main things that I wanted to do with this Cannonball podcast was look at my own prayer and examine that and also teach. So today it's levitation. You got the good one. We're going to talk about levitation and maybe how you can levitate yourself if that's something you're interested in. The other thing that pops into my mind is G.K. Chesterton when he talks about angels, that angels can fly because they take themselves lightly and Satan fell by the force of gravity, being too grave, taking himself too seriously. That sort of concept, that sort of idea, I think is behind being able to levitate, being able to be lighter, being able to lift up. So, here we go, episode 7 of the Cannonball Podcast, Levitation. Enjoy. Levitation 101. That's kind of a bold topic, don't you think? If you want to address one of the claims of the saints, this is a pretty good one, right? Miraculous lifting off of the ground. Is it possible for a person to levitate? I researched this a little bit, found out that it is possible. Normal things, even humans, can levitate if they're placed in a strong magnetic field. We've all seen stage magicians who do the levitation, and you know that it's some illusion. There's some trick that we don't know what's going on. We can't figure it out. And it's exciting to be fooled or to be bested, I guess. That they are able to levitate. But I'm not talking about stage magic or like spiritists in the early American experience who would have things staged in their seance rooms. They would have things worked up, ready to go. But real claims. Can a person levitate? There are claims that answer in the affirmative. Some of them are yogis, I guess, a practitioner of yoga or some sort of Buddhism, being able to levitate while meditating. Then there is the claim of some kind of New Age spiritists. I guess that I heard of one guy who could like float out the second story window down to the first story and float inside the first story window. And, that's pretty cool. If you can pull that off, that's a pretty good trick, pretty good parlor trick. But is it a trick? The other place that we see levitation happen, at least in Hollywood, is exorcism, right? The demonic is able to lift someone off the ground and levitate them. So those are the claims. Those are the things that people say that have been actually witnessed. That there's maybe somebody who was doing yoga, meditating his Buddhist way, and what I've read about that is that they don't want to be showy, so you can't see the person do it. because if someone is actually capable of it, that would be the kind of person that is not gonna. It's just for their own enlightenment. It's not showy, and it's not meant to be showy. You're not likely to find easily someone who is capable of that level. So then there are the claims of something rising, telekinesis, or some supernatural force lifting an object or a person, levitating in a haunting. That could be supernatural forces, that could be a demon, is certainly something that's possible, but that's not captured on film either. So, you're left with a situation where the opportunities where it's authentic are going to be the ones that are going to be hidden. Why? Well, why is God a hidden God? That's one of the big questions. And there's a very good answer, I think, exploring C.S. Lewis's Until We Have Faces is maybe one examination of why God is a hidden God. It's about love. It's about exposing ourselves. We can't see God face to face until we have faces. We hide our face. So, anyway, that's another topic for another time. But let's talk about the saints that are known for levitation. There's a story I heard once about St. Vincent Ferrer, that there was a building being built, and the person working on the building, construction worker, was climbing up the building, and he fell. But at this point in St. Vincent's life, so many miraculous things were happening around him that his spiritual director said, I want to put a stop to this. It's kind of sensational. So no more miracles without my permission, okay? So under direction, he couldn't do anything about the guy falling off the building, but he didn't want to just let him die. So St. Vincent told him to wait, and somehow the guy was suspended in midair. And so St. Vincent went to his spiritual director and said, there's a guy who's fallen off the building. Can I do something about it? Can I do something by God's will, by God's power? And he got permission first, so he went back, and then the guy floated carefully down into the ground and was miraculously saved from the fall. I don't know if that story is accurate. It seems pretty fantastic. There's stories of Francis and Dominic that arise sometime after their death, that the people that knew them, the people that recorded their acts while they were on this earth, didn't talk about levitation, but later additions started embellishing the stories, it seems. Or maybe they had access to some eyewitness. Case in point is St. Bonaventure's biography of St. Francis. One of the first stories of the saints that I read, he talks about Francis' levitation, but St. Bonaventure was about 5 years old when Francis died. So he didn't actually know him. He was relying on the testimony of other people in providing the biography of St. Francis. So either he had access to something that is no longer available, or it's a flourish, an embellishment, meant to inspire us in some way or encourage. I don't know. Same thing happened with St. Dominic. He lived about the same time as St. Francis. And I remember reading the story that one of the people that actually knew Dominic wrote about Dominic's life. And a lot of the flourish, a lot of the extra miraculous stuff is absent. Not to say that it didn't happen, but those flourishes seem to be added later by well-meaning authors that maybe heard a story that was oral tradition, and in that oral tradition had been embellished in some way. So there's definitely those cases of real holy people that we don't know, did this really happen or not. It would be fitting if it did happen in their life, but I don't know if it actually did happen in their life. But let's talk about the ones that we have actual documentation. Okay? We don't have video evidence, but we do have very clear eyewitness testimony of some people who have, in their prayer, been lifted off the ground. There are reliable eyewitness testimony to that. Some that I can think of: St. Joseph of Cupertino, St. Mary of Jesus Crucified, St. Padre Pio, and St. Teresa of Avila. So we'll deal with some of these stories. One of the stories of St. Joseph of Cupertino, he seemed to be not so bright, couldn't get into the Franciscans when he first tried, but after perseverance and after some time of providing a witness of his desire for holiness, he was allowed to enter the priesthood and enter the Franciscans. And St. Joseph was often seen floating into the air. It's a case that's very bizarre. I don't know what to make of it. But there are nobles that went to see him, that they wanted to talk to him about spiritual things. And as soon as Joseph came in to the chapel, he saw a statue of Mary and was so moved that he floated up and went over to the statue of Mary and prayed for a while and then floated back. And this guy didn't get the visit that he wanted. But he testified to that as an eyewitness. And I believe Pope Urban, there was one of the Pope Urbans that testified on behalf of St. Joseph floating up off of the ground. This was a regular thing that actually became kind of scandalous. Like, is this guy just trying to show off? Is this a holy thing that's going on? It didn't seem to have any purpose. It didn't seem to serve any purpose other than a visual manifestation of the elevation of his soul. For whatever reason, in God's grace, he wanted to share with us that this was possible with this guy. And then we have St. Mary of Jesus Crucified. She was seen lilting along the tips of trees. I learned about her story in the Catholic Guide to Miracles from Sophia Press, written by Adam Bly. Very good book. I recommend it as a source. The Catholic Guide to Miracles, there's a chapter on Levitation, talks about St. Joseph and St. Mary and St. Teresa. Many people saw Padre Pio saying Mass in the 20th century and testified to him rising up off of the ground in a state of levitation. The one I want to finish with, though, is Teresa, because she's kind of my mentor. She's kind of my go-to. She's kind of my buddy when it comes to mystical things. One of the mystics that I first encountered and is very accessible. I want to explore it in her own words here. Here's how St. Teresa of Avila described rapture an ecstasy, an experience of prayer being drawn outside of herself. It's very difficult to put words on these kinds of experiences, even for her. But this is how she described it. These effects are very striking. One of them is the manifestation of the Lord's mighty power, as we are unable to resist His Majesty's will, either in soul or in body, and are not our own masters. We realize that, however irksome this truth may be, there is one stronger than ourselves, and that these favors are bestowed by Him, and that we of ourselves can do absolutely nothing. This imprints in us great humility. Indeed, I confess that in me it produced great fear, at first a terrible fear. One sees one's body being lifted up from the ground, and although the Spirit draws it after itself, and if no resistance is offered, does so very gently, one does not lose consciousness. At least I myself have had sufficient to enable me to realize that I was being lifted up. The majesty of Him who can do this is manifested in a way that the hair stands on end, and there is produced a great fear of offending so great a God, but a fear overpowered by the deepest love, newly enkindled, for one who, as we see, has so deep a love for so loathsome a worm, as He seems not to be satisfied by literally drawing the soul to Himself, but will also have the body, mortal though it is, and befouled as its clay by all the offenses it has committed. That's from her autobiography. Bishop Diego de Yepes, who knew her, wrote one of her early biographies, also testified to her being lifted up after receiving communion in the convent. So what is it about levitation? What is this that pulls the soul upwards? It pulls the soul upwards that the body wants to follow. And I think the clearest representation that we have of this is the ascension of our Lord. As one of the mysteries of the Rosary, that was always difficult for me to understand, how Jesus floated up into the clouds. That was one thing that seemed like, really? Really? He floated up into the... I mean, I could understand the walking on water, which also would be levitation, and Peter was able to do that as well. You know, the power of the Spirit. Part of the problem for us is the fall. And in the fall, things got turned upside down. That Spirit is meant to be more powerful than matter. But in the state that we find ourselves in, we have the material part of ourselves that is expressing itself in emotion and passion, and that's very, very existentially present. And we feel that very strongly. That can be the driving force, but virtue calls us to control that, the passions on their own, to order them in some way. And so we don't just eat and eat and eat and eat and eat. And we don't just run around with every person that we could procreate with that presents themselves in front of our presence. And we don't just follow willy-nilly these desires, these passions. They're good things, and they're meant to do something good, but they're disordered in our state right now. And the passion left to go on its own, and What was intended in the garden was that spirit ruled over matter. And the intellect and the will, that's the spiritual part of us, was the driving force. The intellect and the will. Not just the animal desires, not just the things from evolution, impulses that we have. The intellect and the will would order. And spirit is meant to be more powerful than matter. So what if we found ourselves in a place where we strengthen our spirit and we do actually experience some ability of, I don't know, unfallen man could just heal himself by willing it. He'd get a cut on his arm and he'd look at it and he'd say, heal. And it would heal. That's sort of what we long for, what we lost in the fall. That's the original loss that is restored in baptism. But that's the thing, it is restored in baptism. So, in the Gospel of John, Jesus says, all these miraculous things that you've seen me do, you're going to do these and greater things than this. Wow. Can you imagine? You're going to do these things and greater than this. Like, you're going to be the one that's going to be so enamored with a desire to be with God that you can feel your soul being drawn upwards, and sometimes the body might just go with it. Interesting. So a couple big takeaways from the whole levitation idea. Why would God present this to us? Why would this be one of the miraculous things, the bending of the laws of physics? We are made for something great, and spirit is meant to master over matter in a way that's real, in a way that we don't comprehend, that we can reflect on, and I think that we should reflect on, and I think very few people do reflect on. The other is, levitation seems to be directly connected with humility. You know, that Chesterton quote, that Satan fell by the force of gravity, took himself too seriously. And I think that's the other takeaway, that if we take ourselves too seriously. There's a story of St. Thomas Aquinas being told that one of the nuns was levitating, and everybody ran out to see it happening. And St. Thomas ran out and he got out there and he said, I didn't realize they wore such big boots. You know, it wasn't the levitation that he was impressed with. It was, oh, look at that. They have big boots. That's kind of funny. When we put too much importance on the wrong things, when we put importance on ourselves, especially, that's when we're drawn down. And the angels can fly because they take themselves lightly. So, levity. And there we have another episode of Cannonball Podcast. Please tell a friend about this podcast because, well, the amazing content and all the great things that they can think about, but we want you to have your own conversations too. So if you're both listening to it, you can talk about what you've heard and reflect on humility and levity and all those great things. We thank our patrons for this project for financial support. And if you're wondering why it's been so long since the last episode has come out, well, it's because of you. It's because of your fault. You didn't sign up to become a patron. You can do so by going to cannonballpodcast.com and click on the red Become a Patron button to support this and hopefully other forthcoming projects. Finally, please pray for us. Put your favorite intercessors on the job. Let us work together to build the kingdom of God. Viva Cristo Rey. Long live Christ the King.